So we are hearing from Vidura is speaking, and he's speaking to he's coming in contact with Maitreya Muni here, and he's referring to, "O my Lord," in the previous verses, "O great sage, O great sage." And now he's talking about the Supreme Lord. Translation: he lies down on his own heart, spread in the form of the sky, and thus placing the whole creation in that space. He expands himself into many living entities, which are manifested as different species of life. He does not have to endeavor for his maintenance because he is the master of all mystic powers and the proprietor of everything. Thus, he is distinct from the living entities. Very technical. Maybe we should read it again. You can try to absorb yourself. He lies down on his own heart, spread in the form of the sky.
He lies down on his own heart, spread in the form of the sky.
And thus placing the whole creation in that space. He expands himself into many living entities, which are manifest as different species of life. He does not have to endeavor for his maintenance, though he is the master of all mystic powers and the proprietor of everything. Thus he is distinct from the living entities. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Again, this is a little technical, so you need to really try to understand what Prabhupada's saying. The questions regarding creation, maintenance, destructions, which are mentioned in different parts of the Bhagavatam, are in relationship to different millenniums, kalpas, and therefore they are differently described by different authorities when questioned by different students. So what Prabhupada is saying is that these three activities of the Supreme Lord, which he manifests through his three manifestations of himself, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, happen regularly. They're called millenniums, kalpas, but different students describe it in different ways. He doesn't say that one is right and one is wrong. What he's saying is that there are details in the descriptions that are different from millennium to millennium. Here, there is no difference regarding the creative principles of the Lord's control over them, yet there is some difference in the minute details because of the different kalpas. Okay, so there's the answer. The gigantic sky is the material body of the Lord called the Virat Rup, and all material creations are resting on the sky or the heart of the Lord. So the heart of the Lord and the sky is considered to be synonymous. Interesting. Therefore, beginning from the sky, the first material manifestation of the gross vision, down to earth, everything is called Brahman. Interesting. Although it takes on material elements, it's still called Brahman. We'll get into that. Sarvam ikalam midam Brahman. There is nothing but the Lord. Do we believe that? There's nothing but the Lord. So that's a hard-on principle, because we make distinctions for the sake of understanding. There's nothing but the Lord. Okay, the living entities, and he is one without a second. So there's no one as great as him, no one is equal to him. The living entities are the superior energies, whereas matter is inferior. Okay, two more elements of the Lord's energy. Us and matter. One is superior and one is inferior. And the combination of these energies bring about the manifestation of this material world, which is the heart of the Lord. Wow. Did you get that? Okay. Om Gyantam Vedandasya Gnanajana Salakaya Chaksu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaurvani Pacharine Nevrasesa Sunyavadi Pastyatire Satarine Vanchakalpa Tarubhischa Kripa Sindhu Pevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay, so it's talking a little bit about the manifestations of creation in this particular aspect of the Lord's functionary. Does the Lord touch the material energy? No, He never touches the material energy, but yet He controls it through His different energies. Here we're getting a little bit about the Virat Rup. The Virat Rup is an imaginary manifestation of the transcendental body of the Lord as it's formulated in relationship to the material energy. So for instance here you'll see, which is definitely mentioned, the sky is the heart of the Lord. The sky is the heart of the Lord. So everything comes from the heart, so the sky is the initial element by which the whole material manifestation unfolds. And as it's mentioned here, ultimately the complete manifestation comes when it comes to the earthy element. When it hits the earthly element, then everything is formulated on the material level. But it starts with the most subtle of all of the elements, which is the sky. And here it's compared to be the heart of the earth. So what is being said here is that although there is a very systematic material expansion of the different creative functions that make up the material energy, from subtle going all the way to gross, from sky to air, from air to fire, from fire to water, from water to earth, and then you have the entire creation. And all of the elements that connect with each of these original elements are manifested as simultaneously, so just like the sky. The sky is ether. So ether is the most subtle, and sound travels through ether. Sound travels through ether. If there was no ether, you couldn't hear anything. Even science, they even know that the radio waves, television images are traveling through the etherical element from one place to another. Now you can see images on these electronic devices. So these electronic devices are really quite good because they've somehow or other discovered that through the ethereal element they can project images and through sound. And Prabhupada said, if there was no ether, you would clap your hand and there would be no sound. So the fact that there's sound means that that's the ethereal element. And that is the sound element. And sound, where does sound come from? Where does sound be picked up? From the ear. So three things are manifested. The ethereal element, the sound, and the source of how the sound is picked up, the ear. And then from that comes the next element, is air. Air is touch. You can feel the air when the air blows, and then you get some sensation on your skin. The skin is the element of touch sensation where you can pick up that. And the air is the movement of that energy from the touch, the experience of the touch, and then the air itself. So as air moves, you can, if there was no air, there would be no sensation when you touch something. Yeah. Then from that comes fire. Fire is sight. You can fire element sight, and the sight is the eye. So the fire element is the element of the next. From subtle to gross, material creation is manifesting. And then comes fire as sight, which means illumination and vision. And then the eye is the element that picks it up. And then the next is water. Water is taste, and taste is the next element. And water is, that's the next element down from fire, is water. And then water has taste, and taste is by the tongue. So you taste things by the tongue. And then the next comes the earthy element, which is smell. All smell comes from the earth. You plant a seed in the ground, you put a rose seed in the ground, and then the rose flower comes up and then has a particular smell that is called ganda. Ganda means sound, smell. And so every aromatic, either pungent, pleasing, or foul aroma comes from the earth. So all of these sensations and the objects to pick up the sensations and the elements themselves are expanded by the Supreme Lord as He creates the energy. And how does He do that? He simply glances over the pradhan. Pradhan is the unmanifested energy of the Lord in its aggregate state. It's called Hiranyagarbha, it's another name for it. It's like a golden egg. And all the elements are in there, along with the 25 elements are there. The senses, the mind, the sense objects, the different elements as we mentioned, all of that is in an aggregate state. But nothing can move without the touch of spirit. And this is a very important part to understand. The scientists say that combinations of matter actually produce life. They say when matter moves in a certain direction, just like a man and woman come together, and then there's life. So they say, well, and then they describe the different secretions and how the embryo gets fertilized by the secretions, and then life comes. But they don't understand, but behind that whole thing, the spirit soul is there. Without the spirit soul, there's no life, because nothing can move without the spirit soul. And the spirit soul is actually the energy of the Lord for this element of creation. In other words, everything is moving by the Lord's connection with the spiritual energy, and everything moves. Otherwise, matter is just simply dead. Nothing happens. Matter is just like this used to be part of a tree. Now the tree at one point was alive. And now that tree is no longer connected to the tree. The tree is life itself, because we know that tree actually is another one of the species of life. And so now this wood that was once parts of a tree is now separated from its source, and therefore it's no life. So how does it move? I move it. Spirit moves it. In other words, you have to have a living entity to make matter act and interact. Otherwise, there is no life. Therefore, the scientific theories that simply combining matter in different ways produces life is faulty, because all their theories are based on the interactions of the elements without the understanding of the spiritual energy. And therefore, everything they say is wrong, because they missed the essential point, which is spirit, like that. And you'll see here Krishna describes, or it's being described about Krishna, that the sky is the heart of the Lord. So for those persons who are very grossly, their minds are very grossly formulated, you might say, when we show them, we say the Lord exists, they say, well, let me see. And then we show them the deity, and they say, well, you just manufactured that. So we say, all right, there's another way you can understand. Just see this material energy as the body of the Lord, and the different parts of the material energy are actually the different parts of the body of the Lord. It's mostly for non-devotees and for atheists also, that actually this material energy also has a form, but it's an imaginary form, and it's actually corresponds with the transcendental body of the Lord. So the Lord's heart is the sky, the trees are the hairs on his bodies, the mountains are his bones, the lakes, oceans are his abdomen. So in this way, and you'll see, it'll get into this description in the 3rd canto here, and also part of it was described in the 2nd canto, on how one can see the Lord, or at least imagine the form of the Lord through the material energy. And it's not, in one sense, it's not an imaginary sense, because everything is coming from the Lord, as it says here in this particular statement. There's nothing outside of the Lord. Just like you have the sun, and then you have the energy of the sun, which is the sunshine. So the sunshine has no existence without the sun. You can't have sunshine unless you have the sun. So the sun is the source of the sunshine. So all of the energies that are working in this material world and in the spiritual world also are also coming from a particular source, and that source is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So everything is, in one sense, God and not God. Does that make sense? If you tell somebody that, they say, well, that's contradictory. It is just, and we can use that example of the sun to explain that analogy. And what is that example? Is that we also say that, well, the sun has come into my room, but the sun's not in your room. If it was, you wouldn't be there, and neither would your room. The sunshine, which is the energy of the sun, has come, and therefore, we say the sun has come. So the sunshine and the sun, in one aspect of understanding, is the same. There's no difference. But then again, you can't say the sun and the sunshine is the same. It's obviously different. So in the same way, all of the energies of the Lord are him, at the same time not him. They are Krishna and not Krishna simultaneously. So the philosophy that we understand is achintya beta beta tattva. Beta abed. Beta beta tattva means that everything is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord. In one lecture, Srila Prabhupada was saying, and you are Krishna. Yeah. And I am Krishna, and the devotees almost fell off their chairs when they were hearing Prabhupada speaking like that. Prabhupada started getting into the oneness of existence. That everything is Krishna, you're Krishna, I'm Krishna, this is Krishna, this is Krishna. Everything is Krishna. And then, then the questions and answers came, and then Prabhupada said, no, we're not Krishna, but we are the energy of Krishna, and therefore his energy and him are non-different, but he's also different. If we think we're Krishna, well, that means we're actually an illusion. But we're not separate from Krishna because we're of the same nature as Krishna. So and this point is very important to understand. Why? Because everything is God. And those who have that understanding treat everything in that way. They treat the material energy as being the energy of the Lord, therefore they don't misuse it, or abuse it, or neglect it. They understand it has a purpose because it is, in one sense, non-different from the Lord. And the non-difference can only be understood when we amalgamate the difference with the non-difference in the form of devotional service. Does that make sense? In other words, soon as you connect the energy with the source through devotional service, then the energy again takes on its pure spiritual nature. So there's no such thing as matter. Matter doesn't exist. We use that term simply for understanding separateness or difference, but ultimately not, because Krishna can't produce anything spiritual. Material. He is pure spirit, and whatever he produces is spiritual. Even from the scientific point of view, the scientists have come up with some correct. They say matter can never be created or destroyed, and they're right, because matter is eternal, but not the forms. The elements which make up the forms are eternal. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. You can't destroy them. They are pure spiritual energy in their initial inception as they come to the material world and then expand themselves in the same sense of their existence. In other words, they expand themselves more and more. But everything is spiritual. When you understand that, you're happy. We make a distinction for the sake of function, but ultimately we know everything is spiritual. Why? Because everything is coming from Krishna. But we're not pantheists. The pantheists think that everything is spiritual, therefore everything is worshipable. So the floor is worshipable, the dog is worshipable, the building is worshipable. No, these are elements that are in their pure sense spiritual, but because they're cut off, they are not worshipable. They're only reconnected to their source by devotional service. Then they take on their spiritual nature or spiritual definition again. So it's very important to understand is that everything is Krishna, and at the same time everything is not Krishna. And when you have that, then you treat everyone in that same way, with respect or with the understanding that this person, although she has a particular body and they have a particular personality, ultimately they belong to Krishna, and in one sense they're never separated from Krishna. Even the elements that make up the body, which disintegrate, the elements don't disintegrate, the forms disintegrate. And those elements are eternal. Interesting. It's like you can see it. If you take water, you put it on a fire in a pan, what does it turn in? It turns into gas, which is another element, that's all. And so you can change the forms of the elements, but you can't destroy the atomic structure, which is the basis of each of the elements. You just rearrange the atomic structure to produce something different, that's all. Yeah, so matter can never be... And Krishna is so intricately connected with everything that Prabhupada would say he's between every atom and he's within every atom. You can't get away from Krishna. It's impossible. He's everywhere. And even you are Krishna, as he said, because you, as a spirit soul, are part and parcel of Krishna, just like the sunshine is part of the sun. So in that sense, we are connected with Krishna. We never lose that connection. The part can never be separated from the whole. But what is the separation? That is called Maya, or illusion. Thinking oneself separate from God is what is called Maya, or illusion. And therefore acting in that false sense of separateness causes us to struggle in this material world. As soon as we realize we're never separated from Krishna, and that connection is reawakened by devotional service. And I use the word reawakened because that connection has always been there. Krishna is always aware of that, but we aren't. We forget our relationship with him, and we think that we have more relationships with the things in this world than we do with God. But these things in this world are also his energy also. And even the body that we have, which changes its form at the time of death, it disintegrates. those elements also, as we mentioned, are coming from the original source. So in one sense, they're non-different. Now, Prabhupada also goes on to explain that with creation, maintenance, and destructions, there are different authorities and there are different students who learn from these different authorities, and they have different understandings of how these three things take place. So you might find that there apparently says that, well, the creation worked in this way and this particular creation. But then again, you'll find other sources, other spiritual sources will say it's like this. And Prabhupada makes the point, both are correct, because during the different manifestations and creations, destructions, there are details that are different, but the element the same is that the source is the same, and that is Krishna. He is the original. He's Adi Purusha, Govindam Adi Purusha Tamaham Bhajami. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachit Ananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karna Karnam. That's the point. Sarva Karna Karnam. He is the cause of all causes, and he is both the remote cause and the initial cause. You can see him as the remote cause, but you can't see him, as the initial cause, but you can't see him as the remote cause. Because behind the scenes, everything is happening by Krishna. But when one gets transcendental vision through pure devotional service, then one can see how everything is working under the hand of the Lord. It becomes clear. Nothing can move. And when you understand that, you think, well, what else is there to do but devotional service? That's the point. That's the main point. Material activities are some kind, just a type of illusion that the conditioned souls take on, thinking that they're material body, and through the material activities they feel that they can enjoy some kind of happiness or satisfaction. But it's an illusion, because everything is spiritual, and what is material means to cut it off from the source, that's all. Prabhupada would use the example, a finger is very valuable. It has a very important part in the function of the body. But if you take that finger and you cut it off and you put it somewhere else, no longer connected to the body, this finger is useless. So we're useless when we're cut off from Krishna. I'm sorry to say that. I'm not calling you useless, but hopefully you get back to Krishna. That's the idea. But when we're connected with Krishna, we have value. And we have everything we need to fulfill our existence as a Supreme Being, as a source of this, the energy of the Supreme Being becomes automatically given by that connection. And when we're cut off, we're miserable. Because it's a false state of consciousness. So what is the difference between being connected and cut off? And it's only one thing. It's called consciousness. See, what's the difference between sleeping and waking? It's consciousness, that's all. You're the same person whether you're sleeping or whether you're waking. But in one state of existence, you're not aware of certain things. In another state, you're aware of other things. So it's a matter of awareness, that's all. So when we come to that stage that we can never be disconnected from Krishna, and everything is his energy, and everything belongs to him, and he's controlling everything. Mayadakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. He controls everything. We think we're in control, but we're not. He gives you a little sense of the idea that you can control things, just so you can somehow use that independence to control things to come back to him in devotional service, that's all. He gives us that free will. That's the only thing that separates us from Krishna, is this false sense of independence. But it's called free will. It's like, the father is working with the child, and the father is guiding the child, but then the father lets the child do something on its own to see if the child can do something productive, just to teach them. And he's teaching the child how to walk or how to do things. And then the child does something wrong. And so, the father is not going to, the child is still connected to the father, and the child thinks, well, I'm doing something different, and therefore because I'm different than the father, I can do something different. So we think we're separate from Krishna, but we're not. We're never separate. Never. At any stage of existence, you're always connected with Krishna, but we have a choice how to connect with Krishna, whether through his external energy or through the internal energy, which is devotional service, like that. And so, so this point is very important to understand, because it is the basis of life's existence. So we use our intelligence to reconnect ourselves and everything that we come in contact with Krishna. Yeah. What is that? There's a particular... That real renunciation means to use everything in the service of the Lord. That's renunciation. To give up something, or to somehow neglect something that could be used in the service of the Lord and calling it renunciation is another false sense of renunciation. In other words, I'm not going to use this. Well, there are certain things you have to give up, which are extraneous to your actual existence. In other words, you have to give up sinful activities. Well, what are sinful activities? That's darkness, that's all it is. Just like, do sinful activities have any substance? No. There is no substance to it at all. Just like we're in this room, and it's got lights. So when you take the lights out of the room's still here, but now it becomes dark. So does darkness have any substance? No. Simply the absence of light, that's all. And people say, well, what is evil? Evil is the absence of good. What is sin? Sin is the wrong activity of the living entity, that's all. And it therefore has no substance. It doesn't exist. In the real sense of the term. So, therefore, connect everything back to Krishna in devotional service, and that is the perfection of life. And that requires guidance and intelligence because of the conditioned soul's conditioning to use everything in their own, how they think it should be used. In other words, for my own benefit, like that. And we use everything for Krishna's benefit. We benefit also because we're never separated from Krishna. And then we can experience that connection. And as soon as we use things for our own selfish interests, then we are again exasperating or continuing to keep that illusionary idea that I'm disconnected. That's all. But I'm never disconnected. Make sense? Did I say anything that didn't make sense? Just checking. Just because, you guys are my checkpoints. Huh?
It makes sense.
Makes sense, okay.
Only this part with free will, I don't know.
Which?
This part with the free will.
Free will.
I'm not sure about this.
Free will is based on the principle of love. And the principle of love is the connecting principle of existence. In other words, the whole idea of life is to love. Without love, there's no life. There's no meaning to life. Those who don't experience love, either in the material or spiritual world, are just miserable. They're not even alive. Love is the purpose of life, and then love means relationship. So developing that relationship with Krishna in devotion awakens our natural love for Krishna. Krishna's love is always there. It's always coming towards us. We have to receive that by reciprocating it with our love. And our love is simply to be conscious of Him and connect everything to Him in our devotional life, and to hear about Him and to become attracted to him through the process of hearing about him. So the free will, love cannot manifest unless there's free will. Love cannot be forced. It can't be forced. You can force a child to do something at a certain point, but when it gets older, then it'll use its free will to rebel against you. So, therefore, only when you attract the principle of relationship through the mood of love does love actually manifest. And then, what is it? What is that? You're using your free will in the right way. That's all. You can use your free will in the wrong way, and Krishna gives you that opportunity. But it's also our nature, because we are part and parcel of Krishna. Krishna is Swarat. Swarat means he's independent. And because we are part of him, we have an element of his nature, and that is called Swarat in minute form. So you can't take that independent nature out of the living entity because it's part and parcel of Krishna. But Krishna is totally independent and we are partially independent. What is that partial independence? We can choose spiritual or material. That is our independence. And when we choose spiritual, then we act in devotional service, and we choose material, we act in a varieties of ways that are outside of devotion. So that free will is part of you. You can't take that. Krishna will not. I mean, Krishna can check your free will because he's all powerful. He can do that, but he doesn't, because he gives you a chance to choose. Do you want me or do you want this material energy? But Krishna is so kind that he persuades us to take him by coming in his transcendental form, by manifesting himself in the form of his holy name, by coming in the form of religious scriptures, by coming in the form of the pure devotees of the Lord, by coming in the form of the prasadam of the Lord. So he comes, and then if you don't get it out of all these, then he comes in the form of suffering. And then he says, when are you going to get it, It's all about me. So then suffering is the ultimate, teacher that, you can't be separate from God. All you get is suffering, that's all. Those who connect with the Lord never suffer. Because suffering is simply a feature of the material energy. On the spiritual platform, there's no suffering. Yes, Madhu.
Maharaj, we have this free will, but sometimes we feel like we desire something, but we feel like forced to act in a certain other way. Like we want to change some habit, but we are pulled toward this.
Yeah.
So how to
Yeah.
make to the direction?
I'll give you an analogy.
Yes.
You're driving a car. You're going down the road. You're going, say, 50 miles an hour. You come to a very big turn in the road. If you don't slow your car down, you won't make the turn. The turn forces you to slow down. So if you want to change the directions in your life, you have to slow down in the direction you're going. Because karma will push you, habit will push you in that direction. You have to slow down and recalculate. I want to go in this direction. That means you have to slow down in the direction you're going and then look in the direction you want to go. And that takes what we say, practice. Because habit is second nature, which comes out in the form of our karma. It looks like karma, but in the same time, karma develops a certain habit, and that in that habit we act in a certain way, or think in a certain way also. So then we just have to, I'm acting like this is my condition, I want to change. So what do I have to do to change? Well, the first thing is stop doing what you're doing. But that doesn't really work completely. It's just step one. Step two means to associate with those who you want to be like. See who has those characteristics and qualities you want to be like, and then go for that association. That is the most powerful way. You can do it without that, but it's much slower. But that takes great intelligence. Because your conditioned nature will again arise in circumstance. That's why we sometimes tell devotees, don't go in this situation, because as soon as you're in that situation, you're going to again make that mistake. Avoid that situation. So we keep you away from the situations which provoke the things that you want to get rid of. Like sometimes, just say, using this as an example, Prabhupada used this example. Before you came to Krishna consciousness, maybe you smoked cigarettes. Okay. So all right, so now you've been practicing and you're not smoking anymore. Then you meet your old friends again, and they want to talk to you and spend some time, and then they're smoking, they hand you a cigarette. So now you're back in that old element, and you think, all right, just to be sociable. And you might also, and then all of a sudden, then after you do it, you think, oh, what did I do? This is a mistake. But the environment causes you to act in a way that is something that you gave up and you don't want to go back to, but still there is that seed is still there within you. If that seed is not there, even in that association, it won't work. You won't change. But if there's that little seed, and you'll see that happens. When people are in certain situations, they act in according to that situation. But when they're outside of that situation, they think they're different, but they're not. They can't see the subtle aspect of their desires. That makes sense? Yes. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's why we say sadhu sangha. That's how Prabhupada said the most powerful and most effective way to become Krishna conscious is take association with advanced devotees. This is the most effective way. And the most, what you say, the fastest way also. Association with devotees who are advanced in Krishna consciousness. But association with devotees in general is the foundation for our development in Krishna consciousness. But when you get association with great souls, then that's the fast track.
How we know who is advanced?
Huh?
How we know who is advanced?
That's another story. Well, let's see. When you want to develop a relationship with someone, as you're developing that relationship, you learn about what are their characteristics, what are their qualities, what are their activities, what's their personality like. You get to know them. And then by getting to know, you can give an understanding of what they're like, what they do, like that. So we have to understand what are the characteristics and activities of the great souls. That we have to know. A little bit. You can't know everything completely because there's certain things you can't see. Because unless we're on that same level, then you'll be able to see that. But the characteristics that we see is that they make Krishna their number one focus in life. That's one of the great things. Their business is Krishna only. They may do other things, but they connect everything with Krishna. They don't find fault in others. And then they are adoshadarshi. They don't see the faults of others. That's another quality of a great soul. They're always looking for an opportunity to glorify the Lord. They do it when they're with people, and they do it when they're outside of association. They're always either hearing the glories of the Lord, speaking the glories of the Lord. or doing some service to glorify the Lord. These are some of the characteristics of the great souls. And there's more. These are some of the main ones, anyway. Just like there was the brother of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. He accepted Lord Chaitanya, but he couldn't accept Lord Nityananda. For some reason, he was not able to accept Lord Nityananda, and therefore he committed an offense. Now, Lord Nityananda has all good qualities, but he's also Avaduta. He does things that are not what we say normally done by the Supreme Lord. In his leelas, sometimes he'll jump into the river and chase crocodiles. Or he sits on the lap of Srivas Thakur's wife and acts like a little child. She's an elderly lady. Or sometimes he'll go into ecstasy and take off all his clothes and dance. He did that. Lord Chaitanya got really concerned and ran over and threw his charter around him. So he does things but that doesn't take away from his greatness. But if we try to do that, we would be a fool and be condemned for such things. So many greats, just like, I'll give you an example, this is another example. The devotees were in Calcutta. This was in the early days of Krishna Consciousness, when Prabhupada first took his Western disciples to India. So they got invited by one very prestigious person, nice Indian family, very nice family. And so they invited Prabhupada and all the disciples for prasadam. So they were distributing prasadam, and then the devotees noticed there were onion pakoras. Pakoras, but they were onions. And, the devotees, they said, Prabhupada, onions. Prabhupada said, never mind. Just eat. Now, if we would have did that without Prabhupada's guidance, well, why did Prabhupada do that? He didn't want to offend the host. He didn't want to offend the host by rejecting some of the foodstuffs that they gave. That was Prabhupada's sensitivity. Now, and then another time when when a devotee was in Russia, and they were preaching in Russia, and they said to Prabhupada, there's nothing here to eat but meat. Prabhupada said, then eat meat, but preach. Now, we couldn't do that and give that same instruction and expect that to be, valid. But Prabhupada could do it because he's on a transcendental platform. You can't understand the mind of a pure devotee. He may do something that appears to be something ordinary or even against religious principles. Tejasam Rajosaya is the actual statement. When the fire is like fire. If you get too close to the fire, you may get burnt. But if you put fire next to fire, fire doesn't burn fire. So Prabhupada, when he's someone on that level of spirituality, may do something that it looks material, even against the principles. But it's not. From their perspective, it has a particular reason. And they don't do anything reasonable. But many times they will follow the ordinary sense in order to teach others, because of that verse from the Bhagavad Gita, that whatever a great man does, common men follow. Just like Prabhupada, one time they gave Prabhupada some 7-Up. And 7-Up is like Limca from India. If you've been to India, you know what Limca is, right? It's a very, nice lemony drink. And it's very popular in India. And so they gave Prabhupada some 7-Up, which is very similar to Limca. And Prabhupada liked it. And so after that, all the devotees started drinking 7-Up. Well, Prabhupada drank 7-Up. Okay. But then Prabhupada said, what is this? Why is everybody drinking 7-Up? So, they just gave it to him, so he took it one time, and, now it became, but Prabhupada shut it down, said, this is not our program, So you can't imitate the great souls, but then again, if they do something different, you have to understand there's a reason for that. Does that make sense?
Maharaj, I wanted to ask you, you explain about advanced devotee, you explain externally, some behavior, some his attitude, but what is, sometimes this question to me comes from inside, how they look at the world, at everything.
Well, we can't imitate, I can't describe what the vision they have. That's something, Matsya has his hand up on that. I can't describe what they see, but we can understand that their vision is a lot different than what our vision is. They're not seeing the material energy. They're seeing Krishna within them, spiritual energy, and they're seeing everything connected to Krishna.
Mm-hmm.
They have a completely different vision. And it's not theoretical. It's actually realized. Of course, there are those on the theoretical level, but those who are actually great souls, devotees would say, when Prabhupada looks at you, you feel like you're completely naked. What does that mean? He can see everything about you. Devotees, we all had that experience. I had that experience. Prabhupada looked at me too, and I thought, oh my God, what is he seeing? I'm going to run. But his seeing is not judgmental. He's seeing you for who you are. He may also see what is about you that needs to be corrected to help bring you to Krishna consciousness. But it's like a doctor who is trying to treat a patient. He learns about the disease, that's all. But Prabhupada's vision, and devotees would say that, when he's looking at me, I feel like he's seeing everything about me. And that was a common thing when devotees had that experience. So yeah, Prabhupada's vision was not like our vision. But then again, there are those who are maybe not as developed as Prabhupada, but they also have higher vision than we do, or higher understanding than we do. Matsya, you wanted to add something to?
Yeah, I appreciate your answer, Maharaj. It's interesting points of view. As far as I understand, there are different ways to look at this question, to answer this question. Like Shukadeva Goswami, who simply didn't care about naked women. But then also in the first canto, from chapter 7 until I think 14, the qualities of a devotee have been described as knowledge and renunciation.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's something that Mother would appreciate, the internal attitude of the devotee, looking through the knowledge and renunciation.
Seeing everything in relationship to Krishna's knowledge, and what is the renunciation part?
The detachment from this world.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're detached from any forms of material activities or anything that is separate from Krishna.
Like the point in these chapters is that we cannot see bhakti, but we can understand bhakti through
Symptoms.
those two things.
Yeah, you look for the symptoms, the characteristics of these. But these are some of the main things, is that they're eager to glorify Krishna, they're eager to serve Krishna. One of the qualities of a great soul doesn't waste one moment. That's on that. Those who reach the Bhava platform, it's described in Nectar Devotion. One of the qualities of those on the Bhava platform doesn't like to waste one moment of time, and becomes upset if they find themselves wasting time. If somebody wastes their time, they'll become upset at that person. Or if they see themselves also falling into that, they become upset. They don't, every moment they want to use for Krishna. It's actually something that's very, very strong in their character. Sometimes devotees would have to travel with Prabhupada. So just before they would leave, Prabhupada would sit down to do Gayatri. It would be that time for Gayatri. So devotees would sit down and do Gayatri, and Prabhupada would finish real fast and get up and go. And then devotees would, oh my God, Prabhupada's done already and he's leaving. He won't wait for you. If he's going someplace, he's not going to wait for you. You got to wait for him. And if he's ready to go, you have to be ready to go, or else he'll leave you behind. There's many stories about that. Prabhupada never wanted to waste a moment. It was like, it becomes almost fanatical when you see it. Every moment to be used for Krishna. That's one of the characteristics of a great soul. No, but there are many other ones too. They don't say, well, do this, but I'm not doing this. They don't say that. They teach by example. Yes. Yes, Narada.
About this example that you give, I think it was Harikesh Prabhu, and Prabhupada said, if you go in Russia, just eat meat. But before a couple months, it was one lecture of one devotee who said that if your parents is old and if you depend on them, if they're eating meat, you must give them meat, because they was care about you when you were small and something like this.
I'm sorry, I missed one point you were saying.
It was some lecture in Croatia.
Yeah.
And somehow we are not arguing with this.
We're not what? Somehow or other we're not what?
We don't agree with this. We don't agree with those.
Oh, we don't agree. Okay.
And if you can comment this, because they after explained that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was also organized in some hotel were serving meat for English people that they can preach. And all this was example like if your parents is old and you depend on them, then you must cook them meat. And
if your parents are meat eaters and you depend on them, you must cook them meat. That's what was said about
If you depend on them.
Yeah.
And also that counts as pious activity, and Krishna is very satisfied
By taking care of parents.
by cooking them meat.
Because that's what they want.
And you were not been able to convince them otherwise.
And so that was spoken in a lecture by one devotee who gave that.
it was not in temple, it was outside.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most influential and prominent preacher in Croatia.
Well, I think that is definitely time, place, and circumstance. I don't think that's an absolute principle where everybody should go along with that idea. You have to judge it accordingly. That kind of statement will somehow or other bewilder people who are very following the principles and think that they're outside the principles. But just like, for example, I had one disciple, and she had a daughter, And the daughter, was eating meat. And her mother was cooking it for her. I just said, stop cooking it for her. But she's dependent on me. She lives at the house. She doesn't have any. I just said, stop, that's all. And she did. And the daughter had to go out and find other sources to get that, whatever she wanted, to get that kind of foodstuffs. So you're using that example and saying that it's authoritative, or what we say, acceptable, that these parents are old, they want meat, they require it, you're dependent on them. You put all of these things together and then you can say, well, yeah, but the idea is don't be dependent on them. If you disconnect that dependence, then you don't have to perform these activities. Then you might say, well, they need you, otherwise, and they'll never be able to live. But if I was in that situation, I would just find some way to somehow convince them by giving them other foods that are similar to meat, taste like meat, but it's not actually meat. And we have gluten, we have what is it, seitan, and so many of these different soya, something. Because in another sense, meat is not healthy. So you're also contributing to, making that health go down. People get so addicted to a particular type of foodstuff that it becomes part of their body, and it seems like they have to have it. Otherwise, they feel like if I don't have it, I get sick. I need it. It's just a particular type of conditioning over a long-term period of time. But if I put myself in that situation, I would look for ways to, not do it, or do something different that might be satisfying. That's what I would do. Yes, Matsya.
Yeah, not even the modern science recommends meat anymore.
Yeah.
There was an initiative from just a couple of years ago, American Association of Doctors. I'm not sure what is exactly the title of their association, but it is American Association of Doctors who pleaded to hospitals to provide organic, vegetarian, vegan diet for the patients in order to help them to recover better. I have that on my computer.
Yeah. I've been preaching in jails too. There's one jail in California, it's completely vegetarian. I think it's the only one, at least the only one I'm aware of. Well, what pushes the whole meat thing is the meat industry, which is they have a very powerful insight within the government also. That's why they can keep pushing it. And they push their propaganda that if you don't, you'll get weak, you don't get enough protein, and then they give us so many other things. But it's the meat industry, they're very, very powerful. Otherwise, everyone knows it's not so good. The karma connected with meat eating is very heavy, really heavy. It's probably the cause of all the problems in the world is innocent slaughter of animals in order to to produce meat, to make huge amounts of money on that. Yeah, it's not healthy and it's not karmically, kosher. Yeah. Okay, so should I end now? Or should we see if there's any more questions? George, you have a
I
question?
have no question, I just say don't end, please.
Don't you? Well, that's up to you. That's up to you guys. You got to keep me going here.
No question.
Gita, what should I do? Should I stop? Continue? Okay. Yes, Rishab. It's not Rishab, it's Rishab. Yeah, Rishab.
When you were speaking about the elements, how they manifest, it is interesting how you said that the water is like one of the most gross one, but after that is earth. But then you say that the tongue is the most ferocious sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking like maybe, like how come that the tongue is the most ferocious, not the smell maybe or some other?
The tongue is the most voracious and difficult to control. And the tongue has two functions, to taste and to vibrate. You see there's certain people can't shut up for a minute, you know. If you ask them to shut up, they go to sleep, you know. Sometimes I get onto the phone and I get on conversation with somebody like that. And it's not a conversation. I just listen, that's all. Can I say something? Oh yeah, you're there, okay. So yeah, this tongue is very difficult. That's why two things to control the tongue. One is prasadam, and the other one is to just speak. And as it says, austerity of speech is to speak truthfully, beneficially, avoid speech that offends, and recite the Vedas or recite scripture regularly to support whatever you're saying. This is actually what they call austerities of speech. Gravity is one of the principles of the mind. It's an austerity of the mind where you contemplate things. You contemplate life, you contemplate philosophical teachings, contemplation, and that develops an internal mood where one can control speech much, much easier. And true speech is to speak, what is that? Real eloquence, what is it?
It says right here.
Eloquence? And what does it say?
Take the book up.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, thank you very much. Essential truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. So essential truth spoken concisely. Yeah. So concisely, or just to the point. It's like sometimes I ask people a question and I get a whole lecture, as an answer. I just ask you where you're going. All you have to tell me is where you're going, not where you've been or where you want to go or what you're going to do when you're going to get there. It's like that, And people, we have to learn to control that speech in such a way as just speak to the point. Get right to the point. And that takes practice. That's an art. But, practice, for those who have that problem, practice silence. Don't say anything. When you practice that for a while, your hearing will also increase. When your hearing increases, your intelligence also becomes sharper. And when your intelligence becomes sharper, then you can use speech in a more concise and more direct way. I'm still practicing it, trying to. Okay, So for the sake of concise speech, we'll say all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.